trying to find the life on my own apart from you. I am the king of excuses. I've got one for every selfish thing I do.
And what's going on?
What's going on inside of me? I despise my own behavior. This only serves to confirm my suspicions that I'm still a man in need of a savior. I wanna be in the light as you are in the light. I wanna shine like stars in the heavens. Oh Lord, be my light and be my salvation. It's all I want is to be in the light. Oh yeah. All I want is to be in the light. The disease of self runs through my blood. It's a cancer fatal to my soul. Every attempt on my behalf has failed to bring this sickness under control.
What's going on?
Tell me what's going on inside of me. I despise my own behavior. This only serves to confirm my suspicion that I'm still a man in need of a savior. I wanna be in the light as you are in the light. I wanna shine like stars in the heavens. Oh Lord, be my light and be my salvation. 'Cause all I want is to be in the light. Oh yeah, all I want is to be in the light. Da 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 becomes me, there's nothing left to lose, and the secrets that did run me, your presence of you. Pride is no position, riches has no worth, and the fame that once did cover me, taken to the has been taken to the earth. Tell me what's going on inside of me. I despise my own behavior. My suspicion that I'm still in need of a savior. Yeah, I wanna be in the light as you are in the light. I wanna shine like stars in the heavens. Oh Lord, be my light and be my salvation. 'Cause all I want is to be in the light. Yeah, all I want is to be in the light. I wanna be in the light as you are in the light. I wanna shine like the stars in the heavens. Oh Lord, be my light and be my salvation. 'Cause all I want is to be in the light. Yeah, all I want is to be in the light. All I want is to be in the light.
Al, will you take a look at the mess in here?
Yes, sir. It's no wonder they called us in to fix this place up.
All the unfinished jobs around the place. we'd better go over the blueprints to see what the designer actually wanted.
Well, you'd think they would have called us in to fix the inside up first. I mean, before all the work was done on the outside.
Yeah, well, some people think that appearance is more important than what's on the inside.
I mean, well, you just look at the projects that have been started and then, just left because they lost interest.
Yeah, don't blame them. We better turn the lights on and have a look at the blueprints. Okay, let's get started now.
Okay then. Wait!
Yeah, just start clearing up that mess in the corner there so that we can see what to do next.
Will you take a look at this?
What's that, Al?
A box of questionable literature.
Yes, it's amazing the amount of trash that some people allow into their lives, eh?
Yeah. Now, throw it away. Look, we need to get rid of as much garbage as possible from here.
This wall isn't meant to be here.
Well, it's been built to last. Nothing's going to get past this.
Yeah, no one's going to knock this down in a hurry.
Yeah, well, it needs to come down. You want to see the stuff that it's blocking.
Why don't you try running into it, Al?
I don't think so.
You know what, Al?
What's that, Tim?
This reminds me of somebody we know.
Who's that, Tim?
Mike Watson.
How's that, Tim?
We went to school together. Spent all his time and money on the way he looked, all his appearance,
Yeah, the amount of time he spent down the gym toning his body.
The amount of money he spent on his clothes.
The budget for his wardrobe was more than my yearly allowance.
Not to mention the amount of money he spent on his hair care products.
Yeah, provided all he had to do was stand there and look pretty, he was fine. But the minute he got into a situation where he had to tap into his emotions, he was screwed. All looks, no substance.
You're right, Al. You see, no matter how many times we tried to tell him, it was as if, he didn't want to change.
Yeah, man. It's like he had a wall, just like this wall here. Man, it's blocking all the sunlight and airflow from getting back here. This area is going musty and starting to rot.
So that's why it needs to come down.
It's no wonder no one noticed the change in that guy. It was like something was stopping all the necessary stuff getting to his heart.
Like what?
Or like basically everything you need so you're not a complete jerk.
Wonder who built this wall?
Well, have a look, see if you can find a name.
Yep. There's an inscription down here. Built by Chance and Co. Now that name rings a bell.
Try looking on the blueprints under project name.
Chance.
Yeah, well, look, we're going to have to knock this wall down. I mean, he obviously doesn't want it here anymore, otherwise he wouldn't have authorised the work to go ahead.
Yeah. What size, what weight hammers do you have there, Al? The normal 6-pounder?
No, Tim. The 8-pounders.
Well, this isn't going to be easy for us. On 3.
1, 2.
Tim and Al. The construction crew as well. There's quite a construction team out there. We're just going to take up an offering down and have a couple of announcements. And as the bags are coming down the aisles and across the roads, if you're a visitor here, please just pass it on to the person beside you. And as it's been done, I'm just going to pray for the offering. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that you have only constructive and positive purposes for our lives. And we thank you for everything that you've given us. And this morning, Lord, as we give this portion back to you, we ask that you take it, bless it, multiply it, and give wisdom to those who use it. In Jesus' name. Amen. Few notices. All the notices are contained within the newsletter. And also inside the newsletter, there is a green slip that has notices about the special events that are coming up in the next few weeks. That's for the month of July. And I just want to remind you that next Sunday night, we have one, and the title is I Don't Believe in God. That's for next Monday night. Some other notices. Contained within the inside cover of the newsletter is all the special prayer points concerning the new building and all the things that need to be upheld and prayed for. So I really appreciate you taking the time to just look at those and keeping those things in mind when you're praying for the church and the activities of the church. Those are all the notices. Today's theme is constructive change. And I want to tell you a very brief story about which I read this week. And it's the story of a man called Carlos Morales, who lives in Spain, was born in Spain. He was one of 14 children, and he was born into a life of crime. By the time he was age 25, he was sentenced to a 16-year sentence in prison. A few years into that sentence, he had a visit by a man called Jose Cestidos. And Jose Cestidos shared a message with him about, even though he's in prison, how he could be free. And he talked to him about Jesus. And this man, Carlos, and a number of the other inmates prayed and asked God into their lives. And that began a transforming, a changing process within his life. A few years later, he had a visit by another inmate who had also gone through the same thing. And this inmate said to him, Carlos, do you realise that God has not only changed you, he can really make you free? He said to Carlos, why don't you pray that God will release you from prison? Carlos said to him, that would be a miracle, but it's a miracle which I don't have enough faith to believe in. And his friend said to him, I think you should ask him, because I think he can do this. So Carlos prayed a prayer. It was an unusual prayer. He said, God, you know that I want to be faithful to you. But I also know that you can see into the future. And if you can see that if you release me today and allow me to go free today, and then I walked away from you just because I was out of prison, then don't let me get out of prison at all. Let me stay in here. On the other hand, because you know that I want to be faithful to you, on the other hand, if you can see that I will still be faithful to you, then make it happen that I can go free. Well, that very night, the warden called Carlos into a cell, and he was less than a third of the way through a 16-year sentence. The warden called Carlos into a cell and said, I've received an order today that you are to go free. Tonight, right now. He walked out of prison right then, less than a third of the way through his sentence. His prayer had been answered that day. 13 years later, just a few weeks ago, this is 13 years later, Carlos was in his home church in the Canary Islands when he had a visitor. They had a visiting pastor who was sitting down the back before he came up the front. Carlos recognised him, went down and said to him, he said, "Do you remember me?" It was this man, Jose Sestitos, who first visited him in prison. He said, "Do you remember me?" He said, "You came to visit us, and because of your message, I was not only set free, but since that time, I've been transformed, I've been changed. Not only set free, I've been changed every day, week by week, year by year." That was 13 years ago. Isn't that amazing story?
Amen.
Hi, welcome everyone once again, especially to those visitors to our special event this morning. This is your chance to participate, so if I can ask you all to stand please, we're going to sing a song, He's Real. We can have someone help us.
We have power. Let's give them a hand.
I got
19 verse 3, which says, "A man's own folly ruins his life, yet his heart rages against the Lord." And the second reading we have is from James 3, verses 13 to 18, which reads, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show it by his good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbour bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from the heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, of the devil. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness."
Yo, what's up? It's time to make that change. People of the world today are fading. Everybody have our ups and downs. You better think about it or you won't be around. It's love. Sent by one from heaven up above. It's simple and plain. This ain't no game, you know what I'm saying? It's time. Yes, time to make the change.
stage. Let's give him a hand again, guys. Forgot to tell him to bring the stand on as well. I don't know whether any of you have seen it, but there's a program on television that I saw for the first time the other night. Marty and Jason, the two of our guys, was kind of wrapped in this thing. It's called Reboot. The computer sort of systems, you know, you imagine yourself being in the circuits of the computer, skiving off through the chips, travelling down the labyrinth of paths and noughts and ones that are all the way through the computer. And everywhere they go, there's good and evil. There's a virus that's trying to attack the system in one place. And the whole program is built around travelling inside a computer. I sat there and thought, this isn't me. It just doesn't grab me at all. But I was intrigued to watch these two guys as they sat there, and every movement as they travelled in this sort of a space-age sort of journey, they would sit there in their chairs, and as the thing went to the right, they'd go to the right. As it went to the left, they'd go left. It's almost as if they were driving a racing car. It's intriguing. Reboot, it was called. But it made me think. I thought, what an amazing story. Because, you know, imagine, I thought to myself, imagine if I could get in the minds of the people here, and I could travel through their minds, the labyrinth. Maybe I could find some corners that are really good. But one of the things about the computer, the reboot program, one of the things about it, that wherever they go, there's this impending virus. It's this kind of virus or that one, or it's some secret weapon one that I've never discovered before, which happened to be the one I saw the other day. But I guess if you could have a pastor that could travel in your mind, there's some areas you'd probably want to say, hey guys, shut that area down. I don't want him traveling there. There's a virus there. There's something I don't want to be seen. You see, the traveller in your time and space of your mind is not always welcome, is it? I know the number of times I've seen people who think you know something. Some years ago, there was a lady I knew. Every time she'd do something wrong, somehow God would show me. I mean, that's the only explanation, because in the natural sort of sense, I didn't normally know. But the number of times it happened, and in the end, this person decided they couldn't cope being around me, so they took off, ran away, went elsewhere. The reality was, I didn't know everything at all. I've forgotten to turn this thing on. The reality was, I didn't know everything at all. I just happened to know some things. But I wonder, what would happen if people could really see the real me? For each one of us here, the real me. So who are we, normally? Now, I've got a couple of friends who are going to come out and help me with some stuff here. So, Marty and Greg, let's give them a hand as they come. Greg's got to stay behind for a minute. And Marty's got some other things here that he's going to bring up for me that he didn't bring. I guess he's two. Now, it strikes me that the most of us sort of characterised by things. I guess tools are a good illustration of what we're characterised by. I mean, for some people, we get into action and we keep going away there. And you think about it really carefully, I ain't got the point here, but they become a real bore. Right? There's some people who get kind of mixed up. For those who don't know what this thing here is, it's a jigsaw. That's good thing to sound this thing. A jigsaw is exactly what it says it is. You can cut, literally cut jigsaws out, or you can cut shapes out. But this tool here, it reminds me of something. It reminds me of the fact that pretty often we're kind of mixed up puzzles in a way, and we're trying to sort of get ourselves together. But I don't know about you, my wife's marvellous on jigsaws, but I can't figure out where the pieces go. It just doesn't happen for me. But I love to buy her jigsaws, and some years ago I found this really good jigsaw that I bought her, a 3,000 piecer. That was a humdinger, because it had this beautiful picture of the Schloss Anna. Now some of you won't know what that is, but it's a castle over in Europe. It's a beautiful castle. And it was taken on an absolutely perfectly clear day. And in front of the castle was this absolutely perfectly clear lake without the water even moving. And it's this perfect reflection of the castle and the background in the lake. And what I didn't realise, I was really persecuting my wife, not helping her. You try and figure out where the sky goes when the sky looks like the water. You try and figure out where the castle goes when you've got two of them, one upside down and one up the right way. It was a nightmare. She very patiently and painstakingly tried to put it together. But first of all, somebody had to cut the jigsaw. And we're kind of like that in some ways. Then some of us are kind of like a bunch of knockers, no? Every chance we get, she's got to knock something. She's got to knock something. That's what we tend to be like sometimes. We're hammerheads. Real hammerheads. Others of us are kind of like screwdrivers. You know? One of the things about a screwdriver that I think most people know about is that they're good for loosening things up. But the trouble is that often people get on the wrong end of these things and they don't know their left from their right. When they're trying to tighten it, they loosen it. When they're trying to loosen it, they tighten it. And I'm always trying to tell people, it's really, really obvious. All you have to do is say clockwise tightens it, anti-clockwise undoes it. How many people do it right? I tell them, clockwise will tighten it. You know what they do? They get a bit loose. Sometimes we're a little like that. Well, I think powerfully, I'll get Greg to come on now. Sometimes we're real people who... we're people who sort of... turning it off. There's two kinds of people in the world, I reckon. People who say a lot and people who don't say a lot, and both of them tend to say nothing. You think about it. We can really annoy people. We can frustrate others everywhere we go. But all of these things in our lives, every one of these tools, we dwell on the negative, but every one of them is actually really for constructive purposes. And that's what we are meant to be. But the trouble is, our tendency is not towards constructive things, it's destructive. Let me ask you a question. How often do you go to work and you walk into work and everybody says to you, "My, you look wonderful. What a wonderful day this is." Monday morning, you know. Isn't it going to be a great week for work? I'm sure your family's going to have a good time. And can I do something that'll really encourage you? How many people have that happen every week at work? Nobody? Strange, isn't it? We tend to, by nature, be destructive. The problem is that much of our destructive nature comes not because we have self-started it, but because it seems to be a part of our society. It's like your house. Now you get into a house, and the guys were pointing to the wall earlier here, and you get into a house and you'll see, you know, you can go over and you can have a look and you can have a look at the timbers and say, "Hey, this timber's rotten." But you know when you built the place, the timber was good. We just recently found out why our place gets so wet. We think we have, in any case. We've tried several times to figure it out. We lost all our leather goods not long after we came here. So wet. But we had a video survey done of a stormwater drain that travels by our property. in our property. And 6.3 metres down the line, the pipe is out of place and water's getting into the ground. Oh, we didn't know that. Oh, we actually didn't even know the pipe was there until a couple of weeks ago. You know, we certainly knew when Mike and I went to have a look at the pipe, and we looked at this cap, and Mike managed to drop something down the pipe, and we really knew then. We kind of tend to be destructive. We start off with what we think is good. Our mothers and fathers look at us when we come as little babes. Oh, isn't that the one cute? Yeah, it's so often. I'm sort of a little more perceptive perhaps than some, or maybe I'm just more of a pessimist. I look at babies and I look at the parents, and I tell you what, because I studied certain things about human nature, I think, oh my goodness, what are you in for, little fella or little girl? You know, it's true. I like a house that we think is built so strong. It's not always so strong. You see, we start with the good wood, but there's negative things here. I don't know how many times I've heard parents who had things to say about their children. You know, they call them a silly boy, or you're dumb, or you're thick, or you're always doing that. You're always being negative. Now, one of the things that we've sought to do in the bringing up of our children is to not do that, because I know those little bits of words are like bits of rot. Pieces of rot that just grow. And if I go around telling my daughter that she's dumb, she's not going to achieve. Both my girls, Adele's always been highly driven, but Johanna's started achieving more and more as she gets older. And it's good. She was scratching her finger and I was wondering what I was going to say next. She laughed. Or what about calling your child a black sheep of the family? You're the one, you always do the work. You know, all the other kids are great, but you're not. I know what that feels like to receive. I've had it. And in the end, it does so much damage. And you're moulded. You actually end up being moulded by the shape of the words that people are putting on you. And we wonder why we have some of the problems we have. You know, if you're tall, you're expected to be old. If you're small, you're expected to be young and immature. I was really impressed with some of the women in the church recently who came to my wife after we'd been through the bad experience. And they said to Pauline, I really want to tell you that we underestimated you, we respect you. You see, she was little, and so they kind of figured small is not necessarily strong. I want to tell you, small parcels are very strong parcels. I know when I've tried to fight it. I'm really careful now. In the old days when we first got married, I used to have opinion that I was going to be right with my wife. Recently, we had a situation where we were putting an offer on a piece of land, and I was going to put an offer $2,000 lower than what my wife suggested. And in the end, I thought, I've gotten into trouble before, when she's often ended up being right. Oh dear, I better give in here. That's the best thing I could have done, because somebody else offered $1,000 more than I was going to offer. But we happened to end up, because Pauline was right, offering $1,000 more than they were offering. Isn't that good? I mean, I thought my wife was small and needed my care. I reckon I get more care from her than I'm able to give her. Especially at the moment, some of the things that have happened. Some people, because they're pretty, they're expected to be intelligent. But I guess that's where all the dumb blonde jokes come from. But it's not true, is it? You see, a person who's blonde's not dumb. I know. I guess when I was younger, the only girls I went out with were brunettes and almost jet black-headed girls. I ended up marrying somebody who was fairly fair. She's getting darker as she gets older. I got two girls who are not totally blonde, but they're not dumb by any means. We do this to people. We so often do it. Or what about, you're the oldest, and if you're the oldest, You ought to be showing the younger ones how to do it. So what? Well, I've said it to my daughter, my older one, sometimes. And I've been right sometimes. But it's the way I say it that needs to be right. And we are, as I said earlier, are prone to a sort of a direction which tends to be more destructive than constructive for people. When I was younger, because I was short and I was conceived at an inconvenient time, I arrived kind of too early, and because I couldn't cope with the education system, I worked out the other day, in a period of 3 years, I moved 5 schools. And that wasn't good. I'd go to one school and we just completed learning the 4 times table or 5 times table. I'd get to the next school and they were going back over that earlier stage, and I never actually got to go beyond the 6 times table until I was in high school. That's a pretty devastating experience. And so I had a really low view of myself because everybody else could do it better. Everybody else could. So I had to ask the question, how do I discover the best me? How do I go about discovering the best me? Most of us don't discover our potential, really. Not really. I mean, I see some people who do. They go way beyond what you might have imagined they could do. The near aspects in our lives, whether we claim to be Christians or we don't claim to be Christians, can have such a powerful impact on us that we almost give up, and sometimes we do give up, and even try. We've got missing dimensions in our lives. We look at other people and say, and think to ourselves, we don't very often say it, we think, well, I wish I could do that. And it happens even to pastors. I know I went through a stage at one point in my life as a pastor where I'd look at other pastors who seem to be so gifted in so many ways. There's one guy, Murray Robertson from Christchurch, who I deeply, deeply respect. The other day I was sitting with him in Christchurch, and 2 other men were talking with him, and they asked him this question. One of them says, wow, it must be so great being a pastor. You know, a big church like you've got. You must be so organised. And Murray very honestly said to them, well, most of the things you hear me talk about are reflective. We really didn't think about it before we did too much. I sat there and thought, well, I wish I'd known that 17 or 19 years ago. Because I always thought this guy had it all worked out. And it turns out he's just like me. And that's a good thing. I feel good about that. I still like to think and dream, and I know he does. But you don't always have it worked out, do we? So how do we discover the best me? The passage we read earlier opened the statement up by saying a man's folly ruins his life. What is folly? Folly are the things that we do that were unnecessary for us to do. That's basically what it is. It's probably a pretty good definition of it. And yet, the second thing it says, and it's proverb, and it's a strange proverb in a way, it said, yet his heart rages against the Lord. Now I pondered that. Why did the proverb say that? Why would it be that a guy would be ruining his life with folly, or a woman would be ruining her life with folly, and yet they seem to want to continue saying, well, God, it's your fault. Because that's really basically what the passage is saying. Well, I pondered it, and I kind of come up with this sort of thought. Having had children, well, one of the things I noticed, unfortunately, was that when they were born, they were great. But when they started pooing their nappies, it was okay. I mean, I was the first one to change the nappies in any case. Pauline did a lot more changing in nappies, I must confess, but it was there. But one of the things that happened in a very short time, they knew, without me even needing to teach them, how to be naughty. Strange. I didn't have to show them a thing. Well, I didn't think I showed them. By then, Pauline and I had resolved a lot of our conflict, so, you know, and we tended to have conflict not in front of the children when we were younger. Sometimes they saw us in conflict and have seen us in conflict, and they're not allowed to tell you about it, so there. But, You know, one of the things I notice with my kids is that when they've done something naughty, guilt impacts the attitude to me. Because when they've been naughty, they can't look me in the eye, or if they do, it's defiantly. And one of our daughters, Johanna, she will look you straight in the eye, you know. And she's gotten, I mean, as she's grown older, she's gotten better and better in life. And I love my daughters. But the way she looks me in the eye, I know that it's not that sort of normal loving way when she's been naughty. She gives me one of those looks as if to say, you just try me, mate. You know? And I do. And most times I win. But not always. I remember when they were little, they knew what guilt was all about. You know how I knew that they knew what guilt was all about? They knew that they were going to sin in my eyes. They knew they were going to do things that were wrong in my eyes. So you know what they did? We only found this out about 3 or 4 years ago when we went to move the toy box out of Johanna's room. And we found 6 wooden spoons hidden behind the toy box. They were anticipating the worst and trying to deal with it in their own way. It would have been better if they'd modified their behaviour, but I guess they hadn't figured that one out at that point. So that's what happened. See, I can bring constructive change, but most often what I tend to do in my human life is I tend to hide the wooden spoon, or try to avoid it, at least. So how can I bring the change? Most of us have tried resolutions, New Year's resolutions. How many of you can honestly say you've kept every resolution you've ever made? Sean?
I never made any, so.
I know one you made. He said he's never going to get married.
Until I was 25.
I didn't hear that part.
26.
You see, we don't. I have a friend whose father was a terrible, I mean, my dad had difficulties with alcohol, some of you know, but this guy had really terrible problems with alcohol. I mean, it was really bad. He would be one of the worst guys in Christchurch in terms of the whole alcohol issue. And he always looked gross. He didn't look like he'd been fed. He smelt and everything. He's a nice guy. He wasn't a bad guy. But that's what he's like. And I remember him promising his son on numerous occasions, I'm going to give up. I'm going to change. But he never did. And sadly enough, he died in a sorrow. Very sad story. We think we've all got it all figured out. Sometimes it's like the young guy who went out looking for the ideal woman. He was going to marry, and he said to his friends, I'm going to marry her when I find her. He found her. The only trouble was she was looking for the ideal man. She never found him. See, that's the problem sometimes. We have perceptions about what we would like, but we're not prepared to modify ourselves. We're not prepared to rethink the things we do. And even when it comes to smaller issues, like inner attitudes, it is so hard sometimes. No, what we do, and we see it here in a multicultural congregation, there's 27 cultures here represented all together. You know what happens? I've heard it several times. We excuse each other by saying, oh, that's a cultural thing. Sometimes we even do worse. We excuse ourselves by saying, my culture has this problem. You shouldn't feel too good about it, really. You know? I guess this is why James, when he spoke, said the things that he said. He said them because he wants to nail us to the wall. He wants us to realise that some wisdom does not come from heaven, as he said, as it was read out earlier, but it's earthly, unspiritual, and listen to this, of the devil. Now, why do most people in society that are not followers of God not want to believe in the devil and Satan? I can tell you why. You believe in him, and then you know where your problems come from. Actually, I think it's a good escape route. I don't know why they say, I don't believe in him, because I think it would be far better, rationally, to say, I believe in Satan, and he's having a bad impact on my life. This is a good excuse, eh? Well, not really. But still, at least you'd know who to blame, to some degree. At least you'd have somebody to share it with. No wonder it's hard to change. We feel guilty about this whole thing. We feel guilty about being badly sourced. You know, our source is Satan, our source is the devil, and we're not changing. I don't know whether many of you will know about this, but years ago when I was younger in the trade, a Japanese started making tools and toys. And excuse the term, but the common term for Japanese products was Jap crap. I wouldn't normally use those kinds of words, but it was meant to describe what it was like. And the reason it happened is because after the war, they had deficient materials, because they had deficient sources. I mean, they were recycling second-hand materials, and their systems weren't good. They were in disarray after the war. But the Japanese were a bright lot of people, because what they did is they sat down and said, hey, we know where we're failing. So they started working out new systems, and they sourced better materials. In fact, they developed systems for getting old materials and making them better. And nowadays, the Japanese make some of the best tools in the world. Quite a few of my tools, some of my really good tools, are Japanese. My vernier caliper, which measures down to a part of a thousandth of an inch, it's Japanese. And it's perfect every time. It doesn't fold. You see, somehow they sat down and they worked out, I've got a deficient system. We've got deficient sources. We need to change this. And I want to read a little bit from James that we didn't read today, because it says this. It says, what causes what? Sorry, the wrong piece. You adulterous people. It's talking to all of us. We're all adulterous. Not because we adulterate with women or men, but because by nature we've tended to reject God and chase after things other than God. That's what the term's talking about. It says that you adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is hatred toward God? Anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. And then a little later on he says this. He says, look, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and we all are, every one of us in this auditorium. And purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord. Now that would mean that we all go, you know, no joy, we have to be full of gloom. But that's actually not what it's saying. Because right at the end, it actually finishes off. If you do these things before the Lord, he will lift you up. And the scripture keeps talking about the fact that if we get our source right, that's God, then the changes that come are much easier. I don't want to say that people can't change without God. They can. But it doesn't necessarily improve them. But if we think about this seriously, if we are truly made by God, and I'm making that supposition because of my own experience and relationship with Him, if we're truly made by Him, then the tool maker has an intention, and all the things I said about those tools before were wrong. The chainsaw is designed for chopping down trees and other things. It's amazing what Marty and Greg get up to with a chainsaw. It would give you nightmares. I mean, they trim hedges with branches of stick. They were doing it outside my office the other night. Meow! What were you guys doing? Well, I was making a pass that your mother-in-law could get along with. Oh, chainsaw. Yeah, Marty said to me, I was just teaching Greg how to use a chainsaw on scrub. Oh, okay. Chainsaws were really designed for trees. It won't. But it worked well. Here's the part. Screwdrivers are not just for loosening things off. Screwdrivers for making things tight and firm and solid. Hammers are not just for hammering people. The hammers are really there to drive the point home, to get the nail in, to really make something solid, a structure solid. And Alan can tell you about that because he uses them a fair bit. And I know how well they can get things home sometimes because, you know, when I've been nailing, if you're anything like me, I'm better with metal than I am with wood. And I don't know how many times I've hit my thumb when I've been trying to nail on nails. And I'm pretty good with a hammer compared to sort of some people. But Alan's better than me, of course. I very rarely ever meet people, pardon me, who really and honestly admit they've plugged into the wrong supply. It's not often that people do that. I guess once you get to that point and you admit that, then change is much easier. And I just want to finish today by saying that if you plug into the right supply of God, He will teach you how to be new. I mean, what was said here in the passage, if we've got envy and selfish ambition and all those other things and disorder and all the other things in our lives, things go wrong. But listen to this, it says, but wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit. Good fruit talks about, you know, that our lives are having good effect. Impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace. They raise a harvest of righteousness. And I want to say to every one of us here this morning that I could tell you, if you want to modify your thinking habits, you could sit there and think for hours and hours on end. And at the moment, there's some programs, and Americans especially have got heavily into this whole thing of, you know, changing your mind to power thinking and all this kind of stuff. I want to say that I actually don't think it's true. Yes, they may have ended up with successful businesses, but can I suggest this one thing? They are still the same person. Something I've noticed with watching people who are right into this whole area. They're still the same basic, simple person. And really what God wants for us is that the thinking will be changed right from the heart to the head. There's a link that's been cut out, joined between the two, and it's a link that's been cut out that'll be our spirit meeting God's spirit. And I want to say to you today, if you haven't made that link, then I want to tell you, when I made that link, that's when my life really changed. I tried before, and I succeeded to a degree in some things, but I never really did very well. And it wasn't until I became a Christian when I was in the workforce that things started to happen, and my mates knew. Some of them reacted badly. They couldn't cope with the new Gary. Others didn't. I guess I, first of all, really realised how much God had changed me. And it really is what He does in my life. It's when I let Him do it.
Amen.
It's when I was walking down the street in Christchurch and a teacher who I respected, but I managed to successfully fail for, came up to me and said, Gary, I've heard rumours in the staff room. And I said, what's that? So I've heard rumours at school about you. You've had a major change in your life. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I've heard that you got 98% in your exams. And for that teacher, that was a radical change. You know, 18% of 15% in maths, and 23% in English. That was a radical change. And they were impressed with this thing, and I actually said to the teacher, and I ended up talking, another teacher called me up a few weeks later and talked with me about it. They'd obviously been talking at the school. And he said, what happened? You know, what made you so motivated? What changed you? And I said, well, the only thing I can explain that happened is that God sort of got into my life. And I came to know Jesus. I actually hadn't known about this teacher, but it turned out this particular teacher turned around and said to me, he says, oh, Gary, I'm so pleased for you. He said, I've not long become a Christian myself. Marvellous. Marvellous. But the other teaching staff heard about this because he went back and talked, and then another teacher came and had a talk with me. He was my maths teacher. I love this guy so deeply. He's one of the top international soccer players, Gwyn Evans. And he gave me so much support. And he was so impressed with the changes because not only had I changed my ability with maths, the reason I changed with that was because the change that had happened in here, the change in my attitudes, the change in my life in every area. I had to acknowledge that the devil was my source in the past, that really I wasn't too good. And I'm not perfect now, and I don't want anybody to go away saying that pastor thinks he's perfect, or anybody here who thinks the church thinks I'm perfect. I've been here long enough for the people. If you go and ask them quietly, you go and ask Pat, she knows me the longest. If I'm perfect, she'll tell you I'm not. But if you go and ask her, you've got to come and ask me about her. See, we're not perfect, but we're changing. And I've seen marvellous changes in Pat, and I can't speak highly enough about the things I've seen happen in her life. And if there's others here like that, so I've just chosen Pat because I've known her the longest here. There's others here too, many of you. But some of you have never known that change, you've never known the power of that change, or you've touched on it and have never experienced it hope. And I'd like to invite you to pray with me now. And if you'd like to pray, then pray is basically just simply talking to God. That word prayer, that's what it means. It's not some great big thing. It's a relationship, just like you talk to anybody else. So if you want to join me, you can leave your eyes open or close. I'm going to close my eyes just to give you privacy. That's the reason I'm doing it. If you'd like to agree with this prayer, at the end of it I'm saying, all the people said, and you can join us by saying, Amen. And don't go, mean it. Say it as if you really mean it. And every one of us with this prayer will be able to say amen if we choose to. So join me right now. Lord God, every one of us is joining me. And it's good to be able to be with you. And we want to say thank you that you have given us an option other than being sourced in the wrong things we've done. You've given us an option to be able to live a life that's positive and that's encouraging and it's exciting. And we want to tell you that we'd like that. But we really need to tell you, God, that there's times when we've really blown it, and you know all about that. We find it hard to admit sometimes, but we want to say sorry this time. We'd like you to move in our lives and help us with a change because we've already proven we can't do it ourselves. We want you not only to change who we are now, but we'd like you to change and stop the things that have come from our heritage that we haven't been able to do much about, just the way people have treated us or the things that have come through our families. And then some of us have had really great families, but there's still been some damage here, Lord. So we want to say right now, help us and change us. In Jesus' mighty name. And all the people said? Yeah. Well done. I want to give you a hand. But let's give the team a hand for all the work they did.